Barnyard Language. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families.
In case your kids haven't already learned all the swears from being in the barn, it might be a good idea to put on some headphones or turn down the volume. While many of our guests are professionals, they aren't your professionals. If you need personalized advice, consult your people.
You see the cat butt? Right.
Welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. Thank you for joining us again here on the podcast. Katie and her cat are here recording. If you're on Patreon, you can see that. If not, you can just imagine that she's trying to keep her cat off the keyboard and away from the microphone. Or maybe not away from the microphone, depending how loud it's purring. Katie, what is going on the farm these days?
This is the girl child's cat. Her name is Dips. Not my child. The cat's name is Dips.
Got it.
These kittens were hand-raised by my kids when they were in an in-home daycare. So you can imagine how tremendously neurotic a cat that was hand-raised by a bunch of children under the age of 5 is.
Right, but also shock-proof.
Yeah, we did not anticipate getting another cat, but they were going to new homes. And there was not even a moment of discussion before this one was in our car coming home with us. At which point I asked my kid what they were going to name her, and my child said, him named Dips, and just looked at me like, duh.
Of course.
Obviously. Other than that, it has been very hot with no rain here, and then today we had one of those days where it got down to 40 overnight, which 40 Fahrenheit, so not a whole lot above freezing. It is absolutely stunning outside today, and I'm having a very hard time doing my work for my job that pays me money so that I can do stuff like having a podcast and feeding my children and Dips. So not a whole lot, just waiting for it to
Did any rain come with that weather shift, or no, it was just a swinging
We have
temperature?
an 80% chance of rain, but today is what they said, but there's no more than like a 10% chance per hour, and there is the nearest thing I saw on the radar is north of the UP in Michigan, so whatever part of Canada that is. And then it looked like maybe there was a storm in Texas, and since we're in Iowa, I really doubt that we're going to get anything from either of those.
I love talking to farmers about weather because it's not just, I don't know. It's very precise. The radar says, and this weather app says. Yeah.
I would love to know from our listeners what the average number of weather apps consulted is per. I'm sure it rises substantially when you're more anxious about the weather, but I'm wondering how many weather apps most families use.
How many sources are we checking here? Which is the most reliable?
Yeah. And if anyone's found a way to not absorb the emotional impact of the weather report when it's less than favorable.
Right. Not the kind of weather report you want on that given day.
Yeah. So what's happening in your world, Arlene?
We had prom round 2 over here. My daughter didn't want to use cows for photos on actual prom day, which is very responsible of her. I think that was the right choice. So we had our friend and photographer, Lindsay, come and do some cow pictures on this past weekend, which is a week after prom. So she got some beautiful cow shots with all of her babies and all of her big cows, and there was a selection criteria that went from former 4-H animals to the favorite cow in the barn to, I'm not even sure how some of them got selected. But anyway, there was a pasture field involved. There were cows on the driveway. There was lots of different cow shots. It was very nice. My husband came in the house after having moved a few cows around and said, I'm not ready for her wedding. And I was like, that's a long way off. He's, no, just the pictures. So it wasn't that he was feeling all that sentimental about the fact that she might get married someday. It was more the number of photos. I was like, well, if it's her wedding day someday, you're not wanted in that many pictures anyway, so you don't need to worry too much about it. And other than that, we're in the countdown to the end of school. There are 2 full weeks left and then a part week. So I'm also in countdown mode of how many things can I try and get done before all of my kids are home all day, every day, because that's what summer looks like around here. There are maybe a few potentially like half day camps going on for different children at different times, but pretty much everyone will be home all the time. So that's a whole new routine to get used to. And we're also in the depths of paperwork for my daughter has already applied to and accepted a spot at university, but now it's all the different things and all the different logins and all the different passwords. And so much of it is secure. And yeah, learning about the bureaucracy of university and what all of that looks like, especially in an online world, is a whole new thing. So yeah, we were doing some more paperwork and scanning of documents today to try and get some stuff completed. So that's another adventure too. Trying to make sure you remember all these very important logins and very important numbers, but none of them are overlap.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the thing too, is that they all have such different criteria for what makes an acceptable password.
Yes. Yeah,
I
and
had to
what their
fill in one the
security
other day
is.
that was for, it was even for something stupid. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't anything that needed near the level of security that they were trying to force upon it. But
That
it was one of those.
they thought that you needed.
Yeah. And then, of course, you get your password in and then it kicks it out. And it'll tell you it's not suitable, but it won't tell you why. And it's.
Yeah, that's right. Try again.
Yeah. Yeah. Are your kids showing this summer for fairs then, or is it only your daughter that does that anyway?
Just my daughter at this point. The middle two boys, we told them they had to do 4-H last summer because it was the first real 4-H season there had been in a while because of the COVID years where there were a lot of restrictions and things weren't happening, and then they were, but just at the last minute, or there weren't really too many live shows. A lot of fairs had still been canceled. So last year they did 4-H, and that I think will be it for a while for animal 4-H. They're doing other 4-H. They're both in my cookie club, but they're not showing animals this year, no. And the youngest will probably do the pre-4-H show at our Holstein show, but it's not till August, so he doesn't actually have to start training anything quite yet. So at this point, yes, just my daughter, but we have 6 4-Hers with animals here. So she has what used to be the sheep barn is now called the Heifer Hotel. And so all the show animals are over there. So there's extra work that's going into raising all of those, but she's the only one of our kids who are actually showing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this will probably be the last year that we will not have kids showing for quite a while. The girl child did Clover Kids this year, and they both will next year. She got an invite to show at one fair this summer, but it's not even the fairgrounds, the club that their school district is in, is technically 4 counties, so it's not even a county fair. The town sits literally in the corner of 4 counties, and so they have a separate fair that's not really a fair, and then it's a whole thing. And of course, because we don't live in town, they will end up being in a separate 4-H club than the one that they're in now. And I don't know, it's a thing. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of updates on that in the future, but I am in no tremendous rush to volunteer to start getting them showing animals.
No, definitely don't. Hold off on that.
No. Yeah.
It'll be fun when it comes, but yes, at this age, it's a lot more work for the parents than it's going to be for
and at
any
this
of the
age,
kids.
the only animals they're old enough to show are bucket and bottle calves. And since we don't have any bucket and bottle calves, we would have to procure some. And
right. Yeah.
I'm guessing
you have lots of years ahead of you. Don't start too early.
Yeah. I'm guessing bucket and bottle calves aren't as bad if you run a dairy and have a lot of them. But a one-off bucket bottle calf is a pain in the ass. And I don't really want to. My kids don't know that they're missing out on anything, so I don't intend to tell them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, should we welcome our guest for this week then?
We should indeed.
Today on the podcast, we're talking to Kevin Cunningham, who's joining us from Northern California. And Kevin, we start each of our interviews with the same question, and this is a way to introduce yourself to our listeners. So we always ask, what are you growing? So this can cover crops and livestock, your family, businesses, and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah,
so
I was actually thinking quite a bit about this question because I like the format of it. And I wanted to go from top down. I could talk about the crops and the animals, and I'll get there. But I was thinking the main thing that we're growing here is our farm, and so that's like the thing we're growing is this farm kind of craziness. And of course, you can't have a farm without the farmers. So I'll start with us. So hopefully, we are growing ourselves through this process of growing the farm. So it's me and my wife, Melanie, are the main owner farmers here at Shakefork Community Farm. And then we are also growing Farmer Clyde, who is our son. So he's 9 years old and gainfully employed by the farm. We actually officially this year he is working chores with us on the crew. So we got finished with chores this morning. We can usually do about 8 to 10 on our morning chores. So he's working with me out there on doing chores. And then we're also growing our farm community, and that includes our apprentices and employees who we see as growing future farmers. So we have an apprentice program. We have 3 to 4 apprentices a year, and usually young people who come here who live and work with us on the farm to learn about farming. And we're actually quite proud of the number of apprentices and employees that we've had that have gone on to either start their own farm businesses or work in agriculture in some way, because I feel like the world needs more farmers. There's very few of them, and we would do a lot better if there was more of them. So we're trying to grow more farmers. That's one of probably our first main crop besides the farm itself and our family. And then as far as the kind of the larger farm community, we're a Shakefork Community Farm. So we have a CSA, we have a Community Supported Agriculture program that we are continuing to grow and build. And my wife Melanie, she's in the background there, are developing, and it's something that we've had since the inception of our farm. It's taken a couple of different iterations and types. So that's growing that kind of customer support, as well as our farmers markets, which is one of the main things that one of our main marketing outlets is the farmers market. So growing our customer base and our community support within the farmers markets. And then also just we tend to be really active in our community, and so we're growing our Humboldt County larger community as well, and that's all kind of part of it. I guess more nuts and bolts kind of stuff of what we're actually growing on the farm. Like I said, we have a community supported agriculture, and that's for the vegetables part of our operation. So we have about 5 acres of mixed vegetables, including a couple of high tunnels that we use to start crops as well as to grow crops during the season year round. We have a year round vegetable production. Luckily, despite the little dusting of snow that we recently had, we are fairly mild climate, so we grow year round. We have a farmer's market that goes year round. Our CSA is seasonal, so it's June through October. So that's the crop production part of our farm. The entirety of the farm is about 85 acres. About 40 of that is river, or on the Van Dusen River, which is a tributary of the Eel River watershed system, and trees and rocks and wildlife. The remainder 40 to 45 is the kind of the farmstead. So we've got about a 45 acre farmstead that includes our pasture fields and the garden and the buildings and outbuildings. And so probably about 35 of that is pasture. We've isolated that we only have about 5 good arable acres, and the rest is fairly rocky and sandy soil. So that all is in permanent pasture. And on that permanent pasture, we intensively manage cattle for beef, grass-fed beef, and we have a small home dairy. So I'm milking 3 cows, and then we're also on that same pasture footprint raising egg layers. So we've got about close to probably 500 egg layers currently in 2 different coop systems. And then seasonally during the summer, we raise broilers, chickens for meat. We'll raise 1,200 or so, 1,000 to 1,200 broiler chickens a year. And then we'll also do a run of Thanksgiving turkeys. So up to 60 some odd Thanksgiving turkeys on the pasture as well. Occasionally, we'll also have a couple of hogs that we raise for farmstead eating. I haven't gotten into any pork production. I don't like pigs enough to go there with pastured pork. And yeah, I guess that's the bulk of everything that we're doing. So we're basically doing a little of just about everything. I have in the past grown small grains. That's actually how we started the farm. So I started as a grain CSA actually. So I started doing oats and barley and wheat, rye, buckwheat, flax, a few other things. We no longer grow that, mainly because when we moved to this particular piece of ground, we only realized we had 5 acres that was at all worth cropping, and the rest was just too rocky and sandy to try to work into crop production. So yeah, that's pretty much the rundown of what we're growing.
To sell your dairy products, or are you guys just eating a lot of ice cream? Which, no judgment from me at all, but it's always interesting hearing what the different legalities allow.
we, yeah, totally. We
There's
do
no
a ice cream maker, and I make butter, and we do a lot of stuff, and the while raw milk is for sale in California, Humboldt County, because it's a very large dairy production. There's a lot of grass-based, awesome dairy production. We actually have strict rules than the rest of California. So milk was important for us. So that's one of the reasons why we milk the cows. And I have quite a so we've got the apprentices who are also feeding as my family. My parents live in the nearest town here, and so that's all about why one of the reasons why we milk the cows is for us. Another thing that I didn't talk about in what we're growing was one of the part from a lot of other farms is the oxen. And so raise and train and use oxen almost exclusively on the farm. We actually do have a tractor and a rototiller and other mechanized equipment, but the oxen is a big part of it. One of the benefits of having dairy cows is that's how I start my oxen. I raise bottle plate to start all of my oxen, and we work with a local dairy farm that's really awesome, Alexander Family Farm up in Crescent City, and so we get calves from them and select out best, 6 calves, and then I'll take those and so that's another reason why we keep the cows. We milk cows is because then I can control and raise a group of bottle calves, and then out of that group of calves, I'll select the best 2 that I like as far as physical condition and personality and all of these things, and they'll become future oxen teams. So, while the dairy isn't necessarily a finite part of it's still a part of the kind of the inner work, the farm organism, you could call it. So that's we do a lot of dairy, and then use the sim pigs and raise calves and do all of the things around the farm that having a dairy cow
that
around
makes a lot
works
of sense.
well
I
for.
was just picturing that you had 3 cows and milk for 3 people, and that seemed a little intense. And obviously we're gonna
Yeah, I mean it is. I mean that would it's a lot of milk.
Obviously we're gonna circle back around to the oxen, but are you selling teams, or do you have like 20 teams of oxen out there now too?
There's there is no
Yeah, I
market
mean, I can't
for
imagine it. It's like a
oxen teams.
real booming thing,
But
but
who knows? Maybe someday. Yeah, I know. Like in England, are where there's a lot of 4-H, working steers. There certainly is it for like calves and you know newer team part of the 4-H groups in New England. Um, and West, that's like where most of the oxen are. Um, you know, to be perfectly honest, I think I might be one of the only Teamsters that's actively keeping oxen on the western part of the U.S. So, um, but yeah, there's I raise, and it's not every year that I raise a set of calves. It's probably teams in rotation. I about every 3 to 4 years that I start a new set of calves. It takes about 4 years for those to be fully mature and to really do any appreciable work on the farm. We will train and do, for those first 4 years, we do a lot of training, and they'll start doing, some light work around, in year 2 and 3. But really at year 4 to 5 is really when they're big enough to actually do a substantial amount of work. You've got a kind of a time lag right there. You got about 4 years of investment that you kind of have to get to before you're actually going to have a team big enough to pull any of substance. And then each team, working life of probably, it's considered good, to get to about 12, 15 years of age. They're not as long lived as a lot of like draft. You can work a draft horse into start getting a little older in their 20s, but it's cattle are different or joint issues, around 12 to 15 years old. So, if you kind of calculate it out, like every 3 to 4 years, I should be team so that I have a team that the X team is kind of getting ready to basically. Yeah, right now I have my main team, and 5, probably going on 6 right now. I have one of my very original oxen, Joseph, and he's kind of in and he is 13-year age range. And he still does some work, and I can work him as a single, and he can be kind of a team if an injury or something. And then I have a young set of calves, are a young working steers, I guess technically. And so they're, yearlings going on 2. And then I have probably another of calves, like, less than a year old, from last year's bottle calves. So that's kind of the age range of the kind of the oxen.
Yeah, I think
that
that's
I
one of
have
the really
currently.
interesting parts about draft animals is it's not like a tractor where you can just, whip down to the neighborhood dealership and pick up another set, so it's
Yeah, I mean, kind of have to think ahead, and that long ago that there were people who were raised selling teams, even in an area like where we're at. I mean, we're vital into the early days of the logging industry here in the county, and you see old pictures, and there was 12, 14 teams. Somebody had to be, used to be able to the local feed hub, you know by a team of
Mhm.
oxen, but now
So,
not
what
any
is
longer.
your ag background? Did you grow up on a farm, or is this a departure from?
I mean, both ration farmers. I did farm, and my family was actually military in the Air Force, and so we moved around quite a bit when I was a kid. Probably at 20 is when I moved up to Humboldt County, and that's when I started getting involved in agriculture. I knew I lost 20-year-old, didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And I knew vaguely I wanted to work outside. And I didn't want to office, and I couldn't afford to live in the city. So I moved up to rural Humboldt, and I got a job working at a local farm here. My mentor, Paul Gentoli of Warren Creek Farms. And so he's kind of a straight ahead, tractor based organic vegetable production, up to about 40 acres of mixed vegetables, a lot of those winter squash, dry beans. We did a lot. He also did some farmers market. We did a lot of wholesale. My early experience in agriculture was working for Paul. Worked for him for 6 years before, and then studying agriculture here at the local college. is how I got my start. There's Redwoods here locally has an agriculture program. That's how I got started doing all of this, and then quickly found that this was what I loved doing.
Just trying to unmic my mute or unmute my mic. You mentioned earlier, Kevin, about the importance of community and how part of your business. And it feels like for some of us that's, that engaging with the community can be difficult or like one more thing. Can you talk about how you and why that's important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the business side of it. It's really important for us um, to engage with the community because everything that we predict marketed within miles of our farm. Like we have a lot of good friends in the industry, that run really different farms where they are produced through a commodity system, and it's just a matter of the way that we organized our farm. We have to have, at least within our local, have to have a strong in sell we produce. And so that's probably from a business perspective why we put so much emphasis on community side of what we do, and that includes face to face at farmers market. But there's also limited to what we can do with that. Being modern age farmers, one of the great ways to kind of broaden is through the social media. And we found that early on. We doing some, marketing here, and we took out a radio ad. We do have a couple of really great local radio stations, and we did a few things that, as far as for marketing, but really, to be perfectly honest, the only thing that's really worked as far as marketing for our farm has social media. There have been plenty of times where, we've had customers show up at farmers market on, maybe a not good weather day when we have, they were like, I showed up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. And when we've then subsequently been able to make a sale. And so that's a really important part of the business. I think Ellie and I also have a strong sense of wanting to develop our community just as a sense of, I don't know, purpose or meaning. We both have volunteered quite a bit on a number of boards for nonprofits and local organizations. Currently, my wife is the president of which is the North Coast Growers Association, which is the group that runs all of the local farmers markets. Board member on the AA as well. I've also been involved with CAF, the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, which is kind of a Californian. I've been locally involved as well as represent for that. Local trusts and shed improvement organizations, our local co-op. A grocery co-op. We've been involved in that kind of broader community just because I think it was interesting. Both Melanie and I, our first generation, both did not grow up in rural areas. And, out of a sense of kind of wanting to root into a place, we've gotten really involved in our local Humboldt County community, kind of looking for that connection and looking to be a part of something that's greater than just ourselves and our farm, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you take on apprentices, do you find typically they're local, or are you finding them from all over the place? Where do they come? How long are they staying? You say they stay on farm. Like, are they living with you or accommodations, or what does that actually look like?
This is actually the first year where we've actually had a local apprentice. We have a new one this year who is actually, born and raised here in Humboldt County. So that's actually not typical apprentice for the farm. As Nepal. The program is on farm, and we have basically kind of three, I don't know, yurts. They're called a yome, which is like a yurt dome, three yurts, and rustic like shirts. They all have those in them. They're it's a rustic structure. And so we do have, we're most of the time our apprentices run from about March through November. So for basic growing season. And they work here. We have educational component that we work into it. They're also paid, not an unpaid apprenticeship. And food, it's kind of an immersive experience. A lot of we have employees on the farm, and part-time, full-time employees. And a lot of our employees work on to employment through. And so it's quite a process. We have application process. We usually do video interviews, a working interview where they come and they work with us for a few days, and we kind of see how they're going to fit into the overall picture of the farm, how the apprentices themselves are going to get along. Sometimes they don't. We try to use some good dynamics there, but yeah, it started as we knew that we needed to have more than just melon on the farm in order to take care of the number of in particular, as well as the working in the garden, because animals are 24/7 and 65. It's helpful to have more hands on the farm. The cows get out because they do. Inevitably, there's, and they go rampaging through the farm. But it's like I said, it's also kind of part of our mission to teach the next generation of young farmers and to try to give, the learning and the experience that both Melanie and I wish we had prior to starting our own farm. We've learned a lot of lessons maybe way than we liked to starting a business and a farm, and trying to prep young people to do that. And it's quite a learning experience on everybody's part. We've learned a lot from them over the years, and hopefully they've also taken away a lot from us as well.
Kevin, as someone who grew up on a hobby farm but didn't grow up in production ag, I actually started farming through a volunteer program that I was part of, and I think it's really underappreciated how much of a gift it can be to apprentice or to volunteer somewhere, so that if you end up realizing that you don't really want to do this, you're learning it before you've sunk all of your own money into it, to get more of the reality of the thing without
definitely
ruining your life. And I think one of the worst things we do to new farmers is to say, well, you won't get rich doing this. I mean, that's probably 100% accurate, but it's not a helpful thing to say. And it's good for apprentices to see the strain, how it impacts the rest of your life. This question was a lot clearer when I wrote it out.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it makes things because like I guess physical separation. I mean, we have our house, their own personal living structures, and then we kind of have a communal, like, larger kitchen area, and so that we also use the kitchen for things like cooking projects, stuff like that. So they have access to these spaces, and then but it is very much bringing people into our home and our family, and that's partly why we do such a it's vetting procedure, make sure that that we have a good somebody who is living with us, and that a lot of times conflicts arise, or there's flat out lies, and there's all kinds of things we've come across over the years of doing so. And it tests us quite a bit. There's some of our other local farms have had kind of apprenticeship programs and quote unquote internship, a way to get cheap labor, right? And I was at market because he's like, "Oh, you still have interns?" I was like, "Well, I intentionally use those as opposed, it has a different connotation. So this is something that, goes into kind of a larger, older realm of, work and learning that we don't do as much in our modern era as the kind of traditional apprentice. There's not too many people that like apprentice to a blacksmith any longer, or any of those kinds of would have been more of a traditional way to pass on knowledge. So I think in those terms, and it's one we have to be really careful with invite here, and how we work with them, and all of those things. And like I said, it's not a way to get cheap labor. And I was telling a fellow farmer, I was like, if we actually look at it, they do paid, like we have a stipend based pay, unlike our employees who, punch a time clock. It is different than that, but we also give them learning, so there's value in, the amount of actual educational component. And then they get all of the farm food, and we pride ourselves on basing the best food we can, best food on the planet. And it's pretty much been our goal is food on the planet. And and have this experience, and they get a lot from that. And if we calculated out how much we spend in, maintaining infrastructure and providing food and doing education and all of the things, I mean, it probably would be cheaper day labor. Like that's the long and the short of it. It's not it's not a day to get labor on the farm, but it is super valuable, to them as well as to us, in a way that is different than employment, as well as different than just book learning.
Well, and I think too, as someone who's been through a program sort of with a similar basis, I think the ownership that you generally get from an apprenticeship or work like that versus paid job where, I do what you tell me and then I get a paycheck and hopefully it doesn't bounce. Versus having a lot more buy-in. And I think too, when you're living at the place that you work, when you get things like that 3 a.m. call that the cows are out, you're getting that much more realistic experience of what farming is like, that it's not a 9 to 5 sort of gig.
Yeah. Definitely. And we are like, this is that we are super transparent. I vaguely knew, when I was for, Paul, my main mentor, I kind of vaguely knew how I could kind of in my head calculate out how much we made at a market, potatoes we shipped that week and whatnot. But as far as like the nuts of the finances, I was completely unprepared, in employment to starting my own business. And we open our books. My wife Melanie is wonderful with the bookkeeping side of the farm, as well as the production planning and all of. They get the opportunity to see actually, line item by line we're making, what we're spending, and that kind of learning is just, I mean, we both wish we had farm, because we, when we started a business in a couple of, business classes at the community college, and I had written a business plan or two. You had a little bit of experience, but it still isn't. I was woefully unprepared for what it took to maintain the cash flow and profitability of a business.
Yeah, that's really important because, I mean, it's probably a lot easier for apprentices or employees to see the ins coming in, especially if they're working at a farmer's market or things like that. But the expenses are a little bit more visible. And if you're not upfront about both sides of the business, then that can lead people to think, wow, they're just raking in the cash, but the reality those other bills, that one just is a envelope in the mail. So if you then there's not that transparency that people need to see what it would be like if they went out on their own.
Yeah, it's we've had, I mean, with our employees to a certain extent, but also just with like local community members. I mean, we both served on these boards, and with the farmers market, and we've had people come in and be like, "Oh man, they just see the amount of cash that's being exchanged at a farmer's, like, wow, that's a lot of fees. We should, be getting this." And it's like, well, you're seeing gross sales. You're not seeing the
Yeah.
expenses are of that farmer to even get to that point where they're selling something. And then each farm is totally unique as far as how much expenses they have and what debt they're carrying, and they just see the cash, and they're like, wow, well, there's a lot of money there. It's like, well, yes and no.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know so it is.
Probably on the very sunniest day when you have, the clouds. That's
Oh
when they
yeah.
see it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, because that's when everybody's out and not actually see you know, the profit and loss statement on one business. So that's one of the things
Yeah,
we do for the apprentices.
absolutely. So
We'll show them the profit and loss. We'll do a monthly breakdown. We'll do all these things so that they get a realistic sense of what it's going to take when they do start their own farms.
sure. So while we're apprentices and money, your other little apprentice, does your son get paid arm? It seems like everyone kind of structures farming a little bit differently. What does he get for chores?
Yeah, so like I said, this is he's 9, so he's really at an age is really on the farm because he's
Mm-hmm.
grew up. This is his native territory. Yeah, this season we started him out, and he does get paid basically 2 to 3 hours that he works in the morning. We've already kind of started a fund that we were putting money into. We started a kind of a savings fund. And the other thing doing with Clyde is we are homeschooling, which kind of started during the COVID pandemic. We were one of those ones that he had started in kindergarten, and we've got 30 kindergarten. We should do something different here. And so we started doing homeschooling with him, and he's in 3rd grade now. And so it is going to be is that he's gonna work on the for an hourly wage, and then that we've already been kind of putting into his savings fund is going to be used for the education materials that we're going to need to purchase for our home. And then and above and beyond that, he'll be a portion of that will get saved, and then he'll have kind of a portion that he gets to use as his own per his own discretion with supervision, of course.
Sure, yeah. Is he starting to show any signs of being a little farmer on wanting to reinvent any of those funds into it?
I don't. We talked a little bit, but for right now, I mean, the main thing that he wants to buy is fireworks. So we're gonna have to moderate some of that a little bit, but
That does sound like a lot of fun.
it does, yeah. And last year was the first some of his own money to buy some 4th of July plans for this 4th of July coming up. So
Well, and maybe you could charge some members of the community to just show. So, it could work
that,
out.
yeah, maybe we could put on a one for the CSR holders or something like that. We'll have to see.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sell a
I
lemonade
think
or
too,
something
you
when
could
people come
probably
to watch his fireworks.
But yeah, no, it's been great having him on the
sorry, you
farm.
could probably get him doing a profit and loss statement. So you could get him doing a
What was that?
profit and loss and a business plan and everything and count it towards your curriculum.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the we want to work out is starting to do a little budget, and some of the that's one of the things that we're doing now in our math program is we're kind of on a money, which gets us through the actual learning of how to work with decimal stuff, but is so I think just the real life. And he's been with us at markets and how to count money and change back, and we've had him at work with the customers, and at least the patient ones that are.
That's how you raise the next generation.
No one has been like, yeah, most ever. I can't say that an instance where somebody's been totally. Yeah, I mean, it's totally random, to be perfect. I have no idea how it happened. when I look, how did this happen? Because it doesn't make much sense. But first generation, I had no livestock experience, and then when I first started working on farms, it was tractor based vegetable production. Like that's what I knew, that's what I was trained on. I always loved, I loved driving the tractor. I loved growing the crops. I didn't necessarily love working with the hydraulic fluid and the lithium grease and, down equipment. I got a proficient, turning inches and working with and what, but it wasn't like, it didn't really feed me, as far as my with my love of farming. And so I always dreamed about draft, and when I got into farming, I just kind of consumed much information as I possibly could. So I read, and I went to back to school and degree from the local ag college here, and I always kind of kept it in my mind that I dreamed of doing something. Of course, it was always drafts because that's what I saw, the material that I came across, and it was actually right when we started looking for our own farm. And like I said, I started at small grains, and so that was because of my tractor based experience. I got tooled up so that I had a small combine and a tractor, and I had all the equipment, and I could basically solo grow. You know, at the time I was growing 15 to 20 acres of small grains by myself as a single person. Harvest. I actually ran a grain CSA for 5 years, partially on leased ground before we bought this farm, and then our first years when we moved to this particular. Um, and then during that time period, I just kind of have an insatiable anything I can about farming, and our local mall here in Eureka had a Borders books, and because of the internet, cut down, the big corporate book chains, and they had a big sale. So I went and I was like, okay, great. I love books. Go to the mall. It's usually where you would find. I went and I picked a book there, and because they were selling out, and I found a book, and it was see if I can find it on the shelf there. But it was a book about oxen. It was Oxen, a Teamster's Manual, by Drew Conroy, and I believe he at University of Connecticut, New Hampshire. I'm not exactly certain, but he's on the East Coast, and he wrote a book, and it's actually out of print now, but it's pretty much the only thing in English that you can find on modern oxen driving and raising. And I found this book, and it was all about oxen, how to raise them, how to train, how to work with them, different things. And at the time, my wife and I had always kind of started with an animal component, getting goats at the time. Before we had the farm on, when we had a rental, we had enough let us keep a couple in the backyard. And so we were milking goats, and when we first moved to the farm, we had all the goat milk, and I did that thing where I bought the calves and I bottle raised them on the goat milk. And out of that, I decided to try, based on solely because of a few things that I had read about, let's. And the idea was like, well, okay, if I don't have any horse experience, I'm not a draft horse person. I don't have anybody around locally that does draft horses. I didn't have a mentor. And, if the oxen, well, we had well-behaved beef, at the end of it. And that was kind of could raise a couple of steers, see how it went, in the end, it working, So I found through working with have a real love for working with cattle in general. I learned a lot working with goats. Why we don't have any goats on the farm anymore. Yeah, they taught me a bit, but personally, why I feel like a little bit more. I like cows. The calm, mellow, and energy, and then just like I still remember this first time. When I had these little these bottle calves, these little bull calves, and I put a little yoke on them, and I attached this little sled, and I put a rock on the sled, and I step up, and I mean, they pulled it. It was freaking amazing. It was just wow. It just worked. And then from there, I kind of started seeing how we could integrate the oxen into the different aspects of the farm that we were developing. And they nice kind of middle power source, like a sized power source. They're a lot of farmers, especially kind of these days with the no-till movement, a lot of farms that can get away with like a small walk behind tractor, yes, rototiller style tractor, and that works good on a quarter vegetable farms. But like I said, we're growing 5 acres of vegetables. It's not the 40 acres of mixed vegetables that I was growing with a tractor previously. So it's kind of investing like the ranged power source. And then, if you were to kind of price out, like, how much do I invest into an oxen team and the amount of hay to, feed them? And then how much do Kubota, going to cost me? It actually works out fairly well to look at what it's going to cost and the amount of hay that you're going to feed, a team of oxen. The benefit is you also, it's a huge part of our program is when we have in the barn, we're mucking those stalls daily, and that manure, which is then back into the garden. So, it just kind of made sense in ways, like, and I kind of got obsessed with it and found that it was something that I really loved. And I had farm experience before that, or touched a cow. I'd never even been close enough to touch, a cow prior to raising these bottle calves. And so I don't have ever known how much I love working with cattle in general without having had that experience.
A comment and 2 questions. We also don't have goats on the farm anymore. So, guessing for much the same reason. God love them.
They're just hell on fences, and like they've got too much personality.
So I realized that we've gotten almost an hour into this interview and have not defined what makes a cattle an ox rather than a cattle.
Yes. Yeah. So, because we have, we work with a lot of school groups, a lot of times, and, we do public tours and stuff. And I often get this, well, what is an ox? Right? We hear that all, we know that word, but know what that means. And of like occupation. So, oxen is an occupation. Like, I'm a farmer, they're an ox. And so broadly be classified as anything working cattle. And that can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different places. If you look worldwide, working cattle are still the biggest class of draftals on the planet. Can include cows, breeding cows. There are parts of the world where you can work cows, and then there's also bulls, and they're intact male bulls where they work bulls. Here in North America, usually the definition of an ox, castrated male bovine that is trained to work. So, and there are reasons why we use castrated males. All of the temperament issues that you would associate with a bull, breed type that can be more or less, they're like in India, a lot of the quote unquote Brahmin style cattle, the Bos Indicus that they work in India are usually uncastrated, tractable and mellow. The bulls of the Bos Taurus breeds tend to be a little bit more aggressive, particularly the breeds that most of the oxen tend to be. I want a Jersey bull, a recipe for, well, you know, the the castration takes care of the aggression that would be common in a bull. And the other thing that's benefit the castration of an ox is that the testosterone increases growth to a point and then limits it. So the ox will be larger of the same breed. So with the influence of the testosterone, and particularly in the longs, so they'll more distinctly be taller than the bulls. Grow longer. For a draft animal, and size is important. It's not the entirety of the base. An ox will be good as just size, but size, particularly height, because of the physics of what you're doing, are actually a benefit to draft. So in North America, like I said, the definition of an ox is a mature male bovine that is trained. So mature meaning 5-year mark of age of development. Like a lot on the East Coast, the New England area, they'll have what they call working steer program. So a lot of the half to 3-year-old is kind of considered the working steer, right? And then at about 4 years old, kind of when they can earn the title being an ox. They've proven themselves through that working steer. Okay, you're an ox. And I like to think of them, it was kind of realize, oh, these guys are athletes. What we're asking of them is a physical endeavor. So I have to treat them like athletes. I have to feed them like athletes, to, work their training as an athletic endeavor. And the oxen that I try to train, I think of them as trying to be basically the best. So that I start with a smaller group of, or I start with 4 to 6 calves, and then narrow it down to kind of the best 2 out of that group in order to continue their training up. That pinnacle as oxen, they should be the kind of think of them sometimes the warrior monks. They're just they're set aside in kind of category above on any other class of bovine. So yeah, it's I like to think of it. I'm a farmer. They're an oxen. It's partly more of what they do than who they are.
Yeah,
but
it
also
sounds
who
like
they
the
are at
cattle
the same
Hunger
time.
Games over there. Um,
It's a good, and I know there have been some people who have done the actual. I forget the whole, uh, um, equation of what means actual, movement. But I mean, you can kind of think of it pound for pound. The general consensus is that pound for pound, an ox is stronger than a horse. Most draft horses tend to be larger than even some of the largest like oxen, if that makes sense. So your average draft horse will be able to, it's larger, but and I'm sure there are draft community members that would argue tooth and nail either the ox is the stronger of the 2. There are documented cases of oxen pulling 10,000 pounds on a sled. Of course, competitive pull, but it's kind of more of a balance of like how much can they pull weight wise, for how of a distance, and then for how much time. So that's why I think of it as more of an athletic endeavor. When you turn your tractor over, I've got 80 horsepower, right, or whatever it is in the engine. And then what's interesting about tractors is that, of course, the longer you run them, the less likely you're going to get that 80 horsepower. right? Right? As the wear and tear of your tractor, and every single time you fire that up, you might get just a little bit less through the wear and tear of that. That equipment slowly becomes an antique tractor. It may not have the same pulling power that it once did. Whereas an ox, because they use them, the stronger they get, right? So, to a point, I mean, you can obviously work so hard that you get diminishing returns. You can, as an athlete, like you can train to the point of and get less strong. In the case of never going to work them that much, you know, um, personality wise, like oxen will never work themselves to death. I mean, this is something that draft horses have been known to do, where they just push to the brink of exhaustion and then keel over. Um, you're never going to get an ox to do that. They will give up and lie down long before reach that point of absolute exhaustion. Just the way they are, it's one of the nicer things about oxen as opposed to horses. You don't have to worry personality themselves into an early grave. Um, yeah, so the more you use them, the stronger they get. So, I try to think about the work that they're doing in terms of that, so I'll do harder, shorter term work like logging, really good. It's like CrossFit for oxen, right? You know, high intensity, short duration, muscle building activity, right? Logging is like probably par excellence, the best like conditioning that you would do with your oxen, because by the time you get them into the garden, you don't want those pulls in the garden to be their maximum pull. You want them to just be able to walk around in circles all day, because honestly, that's what you're going to do in the garden during the season. And that's what you did, during the winter time. You logged, if you lived someplace where it was snowy, great. You had better friction coefficient. You could do heavier pulls in the snow. And then you use that work during the winter to condition your animals so that when it came time in the spring to plow, you had, highly athletic animals that could just go out and plow all day, which is going to be a lot of work, exertion. And so, a lot of the work that I do out in the pasture. So we move a lot of our daily in the pasture. I'm moving chicken feed out to the broilers and the layers. I use that work to condition my animal when I go into the garden. They're in so that they can easily do the work. It's a different way of thinking about horsepower, I guess. It's more about where they're at within their physical athletic development.
For sure. When it comes to the implements that you're using, antiques, or I will admit I know nothing about draft animals. Are there new implements that you can buy for draft animals, or what are the that you're using behind your oxen?
I mean, we started with definitely a lot of it. There's still a lot of that available. Of course, oxen draft equipment is, of course, set up for draft horses. Some of it can be oxen, but we quickly found, and like I have, and there's equipment. I mean, there's being made. I mean, the Amish communities still producing manufactured, draft equipment. Um, it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be for me on the West Coast to act, but it is out there. And I have a brand new, not brand new to me, but it's a newer piece of equipment. I have a draft plow, a small plow. What we found was that I had to be small, because I don't have the horsepower of a tractor. I had to be which is substantial, but not a tractor's, worth of power. And change the way we do the vegetable production specifically, to be this more low till permanent bed system, that really work with the draft power that we have. And so subsequently, I've kind of to making my own equipment to match the tillage are implementing in our garden bed system. So, what that looks like is less of a traditional moldboard plow kind of thing. Of I've got a toolbar that runs in the pathways. It has wheels that run in the pathways behind the oxen, and then I set my yoke to a width that puts the oxen where they walk in the pathways, and then I can do different tools on the bed top that permanent bed. The benefit of this is, the oxen can learn to walk these pathways because walk them all the time. So they're walking in the same spot. And so, unlike any kind of precision agriculture, GPS tractor based system, the oxen can and anticipate where they're going next, and I've even seen them learn where to put their feet based on the firmness of the soil. So if they start veering into it's nice and soft, they're like squishy. I'm going to step back up over to the firm walkway that's not the bed, and so they can learn where to go. And so I have kind of some and bed shaper and cultivation equipment, and then we have a big wagon that we call the ox box that we run same pathways, and we can drop compost directly on top of these beds. And then, like I said, we still have mechanized aspects to it. So we do have a rototiller and a mower that runs all tops. And then we're using big, heavy duty silage to do the where you're using the tarps to kind of size or the vegetative material and then going into it. So it's an interesting balance of old and new as far as the equipment. I'd say definitely kind of retired all of the antique stuff that I once used. I think there's great in restoring and maintaining antique equipment. But I've found that what I want to do is take oxen about it as super high tech, cutting edge, new development in agriculture, as opposed to an anachronistic throwback where, reliving a past. And, I live in like a humid, muggy, like most of the anti I can find is just so rusted, barely functional. It's one of those things like it's better for me to think about it in terms of new equipment than old equipment.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Those antique decorations, you don't want to be
Oh
using them
yeah,
every day.
and I have like I have this walk behind plow that I'll probably always hold on to. Got a story, like I know it was given to me, somebody who had used it and their fathers had plowed to stay around. But I'm not going to use it to pull anymore, basically.
So, Kevin, I know, a fair number of horse draft people. Do ox people concern themselves with a aesthetically matched team the way that horse folks do? Or is it...
Yeah. So, and there certainly are, like, I'm less concerned with well matched and more concerned with well mated. Like, I want a team that works well as opposed to one that looks flashy. Because that's I don't. But there certainly are oxen people who do a lot of show and competitive pulling, where that is it is a consideration. It's really good because that's part of the aspect of it, and I don't down on that at all. There's certainly a beautiful looking team. It looks really good together. I don't have like I'm so far competitive ox pull, show or any of those things that for me it's more important that I have because I'm actually for the work on the farm. I want a team that works well together. And like I said, it's more like there are physical attributes that I look for raising the calves. Like I look for certain conformation characteristics, show me the physicality of it. But honestly, sometimes it's more mental than physical. I've had oxen that are beautiful physical specimens that just have the mental fortitude to do the work. It's like no matter how like buff, if you can't make it through a day's work, and then I've had some animals that Joseph, who is the of my original team, the first team I ever started, he just has whatever it is. Like he's my rock. Like there's been nothing put behind, has not pulled. So he's got the mind game, mental fortitude to do the work, and that's like I really want more and less of a pretty looking coat and well matched with beautiful horns and color and all of those things that might look really good, but it's got to actually they actually end up having to pull. They have to pull. That's what they're out there for. And if they don't have that ability, then that becomes really hard to.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how pretty they are if they're not going to work for you, then they're helpful.
Yeah.
So I think if Katie's okay, we're gonna move away from
That's
oxen
fine,
questions. She might loop back to. We're gonna move into. I mean, I love it too, but we are a parenting podcast as well. So one of the reasons that we started this podcast was about the opportunities and the challenges that parents face. So I was wondering about, we're always interested in when kind of people became parents for the first time. Did those first weeks and months of parenting reveal any yourself that you weren't
Well, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, there's no doubt that when you become a parent, I guess it's one of the few rite of passage experience that we have as modern adults. Where just who you are on a kind of fundamental level. And I'm probably studies about changes biologically, both women and men. And it's like I talk about how it changed what I thought about love. You grow up and you love your parents. You love parents, as long as they're like relatively like stable, parents, you love your parents. You might have to forgive them for things later on down the line, but hopefully for the most part you love it. And then you meet somebody, a relationship, and you love that person. You love, it's different than the way it's you love them. Um, and then when you have that first child and it comes out and you're like, wow, I thought I was, but that's love,
Yeah. Yeah, it's all new, right?
It's sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. But yeah, it it's way eye opening thinking about like there's this little being that comes out is just so dependent upon you, and like it's just blank with obvious personalities, like it's like this, it's a whole different thing. um and so it obviously changes, it changes your sleep, changes the way you socialize, the way in your business, all of those things. And it can be hard. There's no doubt. I mean, we've seen it with ourselves. We've seen it with our friends who have had kids, and it really hard relationships to the point of breaking. There's no changes a lot in your life. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so super lucky to experience. I would never change anything about that for
I
sure.
feel like becoming a parent is one of the things we least get any preparation for. You know, for a lot of us, we grow up learning things, or we go to college or whatever, you know, and we're prepared for a job, and we're, you know, where with parenting, the preparation you get is maybe you babysit some. And then I remember in the hospital, you know, the nurses handed me this person, and like, you know, you have a couple days maybe in the hospital where like somebody else is still in charge, but then they expect you to take it home and know how to keep it alive. And like that switch to being in
Yeah.
charge was a lot more than I anticipated. Um so how did your approach to your farm and your business change
Definitely.
when you added another person?
Well, it was definitely hard, and I would say, it's definitely well warned. Having kids, it was I had a mentor, who he sat me down and he had just like that look on his face, and he's like, first thing, don't have kids your first year. While you start this, bought this property. There was a house on the property, so a lot of places around here, you might end up having to build a house first off, and it's like, okay, well, luckily we didn't have to house. But he knew he had started a farm, and he knew that like the amount of work that it was going to take to start and family was incongruent. So and it was enough. I was like, okay, we waited until the at least a couple years, and I'm glad we did, because um you know I think we were unprepared with the way it was going to affect the other people on the farm. We had the apprentices from we've had apprentices on our farm here. It certainly was hard that when we brought a whole creature that then took us away from them, anticipate. And so those first couple of years were really difficult in working with people who at least could intellectually understand, where we were coming from, but no one they were all young folks, and no one had their own families, and so they just didn't really honestly couldn't empathize with us. Well, you know, why is Melanie in the house? Like, well, she's breastfeeding this child. Don't get this. Like, this one of those things. And so, yeah, it was really difficult. I think some of the early years, especially when you have that newborn that is just fragile. And we tried to think about, you know, we planned, and we gave ourselves this window of time, knowing that like way could have had in June, or July, our growing season. This is work. So we gave ourselves this window fairly close. Son was born late October, and it's on the early side of our down season. At least those first few months, you know, um, were less intensive than the main season. That's more difficult, I think, with and but then, you know, I think one of the things that you're woefully unprepared for as the parent is the how much of a long game we're talking about.
Yes.
you know, you're like, oh, I signed up for
Yes.
something.
I have
It's
teenagers,
like,
so yeah.
right. And I'm just starting to realize that now. I mean, like I said, my son, we got some time left. This isn't
Yeah, there are a lot of years.
it's not even, it's like you go to college, then at 4 years you're done, right? With kids it's
I
different,
feel like, too, for me, one of the big ones
so
was that I
Yeah,
expected
that's
that,
right.
you know, I brought a baby home and I didn't quite know what was going on, but I thought, like a year or maybe 2 years, like I'd have this down pat. And now they're 6 and almost 5, and I'm pretty sure I have less of an idea of what the hell's going on than I did when we started. So, you know,
yeah. and it keeps
Yeah,
changing.
as soon
As
as
soon
you
as you
figure it out, they go through another phase. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're
we're
like,
about to say the
okay,
same thing. As soon as you've
Yeah,
got
and
puzzles.
you got
that's a
that
good point
stage
about
locked
the
down, and then they're moving on.
Yeah, yeah. You got that puzzle solved, and
well,
then
and
all of a
the
sudden it's
timeline
the
of the
next puzzle.
commitment. The best case scenario is that you
Mm-hmm.
have to do it for the rest of your life. It's not a 4 years and then you graduate. The goal
Yeah.
is to do it
Yeah,
forever,
that's right.
and they're a trip.
No, 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 no. Yeah. It definitely did get easier on the farm, like once, in some ways it was easier once he was mobile, but some ways it was harder when he was mobile. And then, okay, so then we've got some, you get some level of independence, and now we don't have to be, doing the toddler thing, but we got this other thing, and you got the school thing. Like that was the big thing, because we didn't start thinking we were going to do homeschooling. I thought maybe it might be something that we'd entertain, but we actually have a good public school here, and then boom, you get a pandemic, and then all of a sudden, boom, well, I guess we're homeschooling. It so there's that added on to what we do. Fairly unusual homeschool. There are some homeschooling fathers, but it's mostly groups and stuff. It's usually just me, and there's just always kinds of these things that we have to keep learning with the kids. Just it's one thing after another. Okay, you know, I've figuring honestly that I tell this all the time. It's like everybody wants to have the download of like, here's how to do it all. But the better thing is, okay, how do I figure out to do it all? Because, like first time I rebuilt a carburetor, I didn't learn that. Like I had to figure that out. And it's a lot of the kids with the kids, you know, no one told you how to do this thing. You just have to like take the skills and problem solve and figure out how to do that, you know?
Yeah, we say pretty often that farming are kind of similar in that way, and there's really a way to farm that everyone does it differently, and it's kind of the same with parenting, right? I mean, we've got different kids, and what works for another, even with the same house, if you've got multiple kids, or you know,
Right.
it doesn't. There's not a recipe that we can follow and be like, there, it. There, we finished up with age 9. Now we'll move on to age 10, and we did it all right. Like there's no one way of getting the secret formula. So yeah, you're right. You just have to kind of learn as you go, and I guess we
Yeah.
all hope we're doing it right, or at least mostly right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
It's like problem solving skills are more valuable, in farming and parenting, and like, being able to, knowledge, or whatever, facts.
Yeah,
Like
right.
you're better off
Hmm.
like knowing how to figure out a problem than actually coming into it with any kind of fixed amount of knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. So, what do you enjoy most to raise Farmer Clyde on the farm?
Having him work with us, um, in the chore setting, like just been, and it's like literally been this week. And he started kind of like we started. So our apprenticeship actually started March 1st. So last Wednesday, we had the first hand, and we had kind of come to as far as negotiate pay, and that was going to be utilized and all those things, and then so last week, this week, and just having him with me while we're doing the chore and out there, but it's kind of focused now. Um, thing, and honestly, because this is his native soil here, it's really helpful. you know, like having a 9-year-old boy out here who knows how to do these things way better than a 20 on a farm and is wanting to learn about it. Sometimes like I would rather have that 9-year-old out there to help me with this thing, because he's going to be more knowledgeable and more skillful to somebody. I have to teach how to use a hammer. It's kind of cool. It's a really neat part of raising a kid. I feel so brilliant, and that as a father, you know, because some of the other dads that I know, who have to work off farm or they work, in town or whatever it is that they do, they don't get to spend as much time. Like, I just feel super lucky. Um, it takes self discipline on my own part to do the homeschooling and, manage my son and, family, going and all of those things. Also get to spend every day with really, really cool. Um, and seeing him exploring and kind of taking ownership is just really, really neat. It's a really,
I think
really
too, it's
cool part
such
of
a
the
gift
process.
to kids to teach them to live in community, and to raise them to be competent humans and to know how to learn things, um, and for them to be able to get to demonstrate that they are competent, useful humans. I think we infantilize a lot of children a lot more than they deserve. My 4-year-old asked for a
Oh
job the
yeah.
other day, like a real job. He's got a baler he wants to buy. He's ready. So they're capable of a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah. Definitely.
So what challenges? Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I always I was just gonna remember a time when Clyde, that 4-year old, and I can't even remember, how the circumstance. But I was working field, and and which is considerable amount of ways away, and he was, I think, somewhere in the Homestead area, and he ended up walking. It was like it's like a quarter mile at least out the grass, all the way out to the back field, and I just thinking about, like, wow, I think most kids have never been that fully independent, across an amount of space on their own, and it's completely safe. I mean, there's nothing out there, but I'm sure, luckily we don't have any poisonous or anything. But it was a long ways to go for a walk all the way out there, and it's just like that's the kind of cool, like, kind of farm kid independence that I think a lot of kids get, because if they were to walk, like, they're going to have to cross 5 streets. It probably is not a safe way for them to go. It was a really, really cool.
So what challenges are you facing parenting as a farmer besides stain removal, which seems to be a big one?
Well, luckily, has taken on all black wardrobe, which we have encouraged, because doesn't show any grease stain. you um, so yeah, that's also one of the reasons why I wear black. See the little bit less. Um, but the general keep things clean is always, there's the cleanliness, and then there's just kind of the things that get left around. Like, wow, it's amazing how many things can get left in just places. you know, I'm like, wow, how did this end up this particular place on top of the hay? I had to deconstruct a pull system for our haystack that the other day, because I think there was some sort of materials handling up to the top of the haystack that it was in
Yeah.
process.
I wish we had our cameras on because you would see a whole lot of nodding. My kids set up a shop on our house stairs the other day and managed to take up all 17 stairs and the landing with their arrangement. And it is, yeah, I was not prepared for that part of parenting.
Oh yeah,
So we ask all. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, yeah.
We ask all of our guests, if you
No,
were
no,
going to
no. There you go.
dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
That we had component at our. I've been out to the East Coast for a certain number of draft events, and I've never been to like a county fair that has a draft event or a steer show or any of those things. Um, so I guess that of what I wish our county. So because I think if I did, like, I would definitely dominate. I'm pretty confident that with my oxen, I have put more weight oxen than most ox teamsters would ever dream of doing. And I feel pretty good with my teamster skills. So like if there was an ox pull at our county fair, yeah, with that trophy for sure.
Yeah, yeah. From the way you talk about them, I'm pretty sure you could probably for different age categories, and then you'd get multiple ribbons, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I have
You could start out
I have
start
abs,
yes, the full range.
but
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to move ahead into our cussing and discussing segment. We've registered for an online platform where listeners can leave their cussing and discussing entries for us, and we'll play them on the show. So go to the show notes and go to our speak pipe to leave us a voice memo, or you can always send us an email at barnyardlanguage@gmail.com, and we will read it out for you. So Katie, you're up first. What are you cussing
like
or discussing
when
discussing
we
this
had
week?
kids, I assumed that I'd have to teach them to be nice to each other, and you teach them to respect their elders and whatever. I feel like that's pretty expected. I did not anticipate the difficulty that comes with teaching your kids to respect adults even when that adult is being an asshole and doesn't really, I don't want to say doesn't deserve respect, because I think everybody deserves respect, but there are people who make it more difficult. Let's put it that way. And I was not prepared for
Yes.
how to teach a 4-year-old that they have to be nice even if this grown-ass adult is not being nice. I just...
Right. It's a little easier when they're their own size, right?
Well,
but
and I mean,
coming
kids
from a
tend
grown up,
to
you have
express
slightly
their
higher
displeasure
standards.
a little more directly. So I find myself saying things like, "Don't kick your sister in the throat," which it was an accident, in all fairness. But navigating the more,
Yeah,
thankfully, passive aggressive ways that adults tend to approach children, I feel like telling a kid how to deal with an adult who hit them would be a lot more straightforward than you have to be polite, but you don't have to be happy about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you can respond honestly if you're
people assholes, because
yeah, that is tricky.
Yeah. Even I have some standards.
Yeah, that too.
And that's basically it. So Kevin, what do you have to cuss and discuss this week?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've kind of let the podcast down because I don't think I've actually cussed the entire time that I've been on here. And I wanted to uphold.
It's not mandatory.
I want to hold oxen teamsters have this reputation, and they are known to cuss so much that they can make sailors blush. And so I think, but I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I certainly quite the vocabulary. We were actually at dinner the other night at the kind of the local brewery pound, the table next to us, and there's they're a group of adults, they're having a discussion about it, and he goes on this and that, and we're sitting just like right next to him, and he goes, oh, because he sees my and he sees that, like, oh, I'm sorry, it's he has heard more from me.
He knows that.
And the interesting thing is, like, I hardly ever hear him cuss. Interesting, because I think I quickly took on the kind of worry about my language. I get the benefit of homeschool. I don't have to worry about him coming to the teacher saying, your son used this word and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, but he doesn't even really cuss that much. But he hears me
Right.
saying it
Yeah.
all the fucking time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unlike my kids and have learned just a word on the bus, at least if he learned one, it's from you. You've got nobody to blame but yourself.
it's an interesting thing. But yeah, no, it's, I don't know. I think I trying to teach my son the pouch is good, and all words, whether
Mm-hmm.
they are expletives or not, carry power. And so you just don't want to use them all the time,
So,
basically.
Arlene,
Yeah, that's
what do
fair.
you have to custom
Time and a
discuss this
place,
week?
right?
Yes.
Mine is very frivolous, but this is the one that came to me. So I thought I was being nice to my houseplants, and some of them were getting kind of root bound. So there was a not frigid day the other day, and I did some repotting. And one of the older plants in the house that was very root bound, and I thought would be delighted by having a brand new, larger pot, is like trying to die on me now. And I don't know why it's being so fickle and such a baby about it, but I was trying to give it new life, and now it feels like it wants to just drop all its leaves and pout
That's
because
such a
it
frustrating
wanted to stay in
bullshit
its
thing.
tiny little pot.
I feel like it's right there with when you
Yeah.
get your kids a new toy
Trying
that
to help
sure
you
they're
live.
gonna love, and they're just like, meh, nope. You're like, why do I bother? Not interested.
Yeah, that's right. Not interested. Yeah, exactly. You could have stayed the way it was.
Yeah.
So we want you very much, Kevin. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that just on that, it's like whenever you try to what they're going to like, and then you have 5 minutes of active play, and then it gets, relegated to the pile, it's like, oh, wow, that didn't go over very well.
Yeah, we'll stick with cardboard boxes and piles of dirt from now on.
Yeah, definitely. My son is making a
So
box for
thank you very much, Kevin. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. If people want to follow you and see what's happening on the farm, where should they find you on social media?
So my Instagram page is active at Shakefork oxen. You can follow the farm page, which is my wife's Instagram at Shakefork Community, and subsequently the same on Facebook. And then, yeah, those are probably the best ways. We've been working on developing our website, so probably also check that out at shakeforkcommunityfarm.com. Yeah, and if you happen to be in far northern California, you're always welcome to stop by the thriving metropolis of Carlotta.
Yeah, thanks for coming
I
on,
will
Kevin.
put it on my bucket list for sure.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, we encourage you to support us by becoming a patron. Go to www.patreon.com/barnyardlanguage to make a small monthly donation to help cover the costs of making the show.
Please rate and review the podcast and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
Instagram and TikTok as Barnyard Language, and on Twitter we are Barnyard Pod. If you want to connect with other farming families, you can.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, please get in touch. We are a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network.